Good afternoon. My name is Andres Castellanos. I work at Feralloy. We are a gold refining company and a chemical manufacturer. Today, I'm going to talk about the Responsible Jury Council new drafts, new modifications, the good things and the bad things. So thank you for your time. I'll try to be as brief as possible, and we'll start immediately. So yeah, we're gonna go right now and into the standards as it is. One very important point of the standard as it is right now, it is that it's aligned to the OECD standards. This is nice. The OECD is an international organization, so mostly of developed countries that guarantee, well, traceability. They're trying to work very hard to guarantee traceability in the gold market. So this is something that is to be recognized for this standard as it is. So these are the only 2 points in the whole standard. The standard is only 10 chapters, as you can see. Very, very, very short standard, very simple standard. And only 2 sections are dedicated to traceability. I want to clarify, due diligence is not traceability. So it's practically 1 point to traceability. Could we go down to the chapter 7? So as you can see, this is like it's a very short standard. The only articles related to the traceability of the so-called recycled gold, now being relabeled as reprocessed gold, stands in 7.3, Article B, which is, the wording here is really ambiguous or vague, which talks about a reasonable determination of the recyclable material. The word reasonable is so open. Reasonable, what is reasonable for me could be completely unreasonable for another entity, and this is not clarified even in the guidances. I would like to state first that this is the standard. The standard is like a general law, and guidances are like the guidance on how to apply the general law with more details. There's no more details on applying a reasonable determination, so it's extremely loose. What is weird here is that this is a traceability standards. The wording in the standard is very strong, such as chain of custody. Chain of custody, one person might assume that the entire supply chain has a custody or has been audited, and it is very far from the truth. The standard as it is right now only certifies a company that is being certified, and its direct suppliers are only being identified. Identified only through paperwork. The suppliers are not being certified, they're not being visited, they do not have to follow any of the chapters or articles or requirements set by the standard. So this standard only covers the certified company and identifies its direct supplier. In the recycled gold, the chain could go 2 or 3 actors more, establishing the point of origin at the pawn shops or cash for gold shops. So these are not even identified in the entire supply chain. So the standard as it is, just to be very clear, does not guarantee traceability for recycled gold. It does guarantee traceability with gold from mines because it requires the mine to be identified in a very short supply chain. But for recycled gold and the entire complexity of the recycled gold supply chain, it does not guarantee. What it does, it guarantees untraceability. So now, well, these standards were made a couple of years ago. Now they have redacted new drafts, and we're going to go over the draft proposals. So as I said in the beginning, I celebrated the inclusion of the OECD guidances into the first chapter, but now they're being eliminated. I do not understand why the RJC is disbanding from the OECD. Doesn't seem logical at all. The OECD is a leader with regards to the guidances. What I've seen when I was submitting our things is that it was being repetitive, and it's not being repetitive. What is set forward in the OECD, it's really clear communication and guidance on how to set appropriate KYCs, know your customers procedures, and traceability procedures. I do not fully understand why this is being eliminated. Some alerts will sound off. There might be probably a possibility of future changes in the OECD with regards to recycled gold that can guarantee traceability. I might imagine the RJC does not want to be a part of this. There's so much, there's not enough information to understand why the RJC is completely not even mentioning the OECD anymore in their standards. So it's something food for thought and something just to keep in mind. Then we'll go down to well, section 2 is eliminated, but it's about publishing due diligence guidances and everything. They shouldn't do so, but I'm not gonna go into much detail. It is not worth it. One part that I do celebrate, and it's very important, is the changes of definition, the proposal from the changes of definition from recycled gold to reprocessed gold. I do celebrate this. This is something that is being led by European refineries, by the International Precious Metal Forum, and led by Sabrina Carib. And this is a more reasonable definition for recycled gold and for the word, the aura of the word recycled to be, for not to be abused anymore. So the definition as it stands is that high-grade material, yes, gold sourced from sources of less than 2% of the eligible material by weight is destined to be discarded. So that's the new definition for recycled. That is very appropriate, and practically what is to the rest of the material to be renamed as reprocessed is anything that contains more than 2% of its weight is to be branded as reprocessed gold. One observation that I have, and that I need to do it, that is very important, is this. Please eliminate waste from precious metals, precious metals from the jewelry and manufacturing process, because they could be relabeled as recycled. Wording does need to be precise, and it's not precise here. So any object that contains precious metals could be relabeled as recycled. So I do recommend for these definitions from reprocessed and recycled to be separated in other in the wording or in the articles. So wording is very important, and if the appropriate words are not used, or could open up the use of the word recycled by indiscriminately, it will not work. It will need to be as specific as possible. So that are my observations, and as I said, not everything is bad. This is very good. This is going to be quite interesting in the next couple of years if these suggestions were to be taken by the RJC. The RJC is one of the most used standards by the jewelry companies and refineries. So we're really looking forward how these drafts end up. From this point on, we will pass on to what used to be 7.3, now it's 5.4. Again, the only article pertaining to traceability is the most ambiguous article of all. The reasonable determination of the origin of the recyclable or reprocessable material to establish that any material described as scrap or waste can legitimately be accepted to meet those definitions. So here, what is reasonable? Like the word reasonable is so ambiguous. Reasonable for somebody is making the direct provider sign them a little paragraph, a disclaimer, claiming that they've done all reasonable efforts to determine the legality of gold. With that simple article, it's done. Reasonable is I've done everything what's possible, and my providers told me that this is from recycled gold and it's from legal origins, only by a simple paragraph in a signed contract. If there are no very clear, concise instructions towards regard traceability or determination of origin, no traceability or determination of origin is going to be guaranteed. So I would like to recommend, and in my recommendations that I'll talk about it at the end of the conversation, we do have some suggestions on how to establish traceability and how to establish transparency in the reprocessed and recycled gold supply chain. Could you please go back to the drafts? One other object that we're talking about is about legacy material or grandfather stock. Grandfathered material is material that is used to be held in storage from investment banks and banks around the world before 2012. The most precise definition of legacy gold is gold with no determined origin. This gold, nobody knows its origin. Since nobody knows its origin, it should be labeled as gold with no determined origin. I don't know what's been happening, why they gave it such an outlandish name, such as grandfathered gold. They haven't even thought into consideration how it seems in translation in Spanish or other languages. If I were to guess why these names come into, I don't know. They're probably thinking of who has a bad relationship with their grandfather. Their grandfather evokes trust, calm, peace. I don't know. It is a weird name, and now it is getting weirder with the modifications. They're finally changing grandfather gold, but now it's kind of a weirder name. It's Legacy. I believe it's like a shorter term for legalized. They wanted to make it sound like it's legalized gold. They might as well just put laundered gold. I don't know why there just can't be transparency and say this is gold without an undetermined origin that is held in investment vaults before 2012. There's been so many conflicts around the world, Second World War, the Holocaust. A lot of gold was stolen before 2012, and now we're getting gold. I'm not saying that most of this gold is from illicit origins, but it's from undisclosed or unknown origins, and it should be disclosed that way. So I don't know why they go into so much trouble to give them weird names. And this is an observation that must be made, and that I have made in the last document that I will go through. Now, could we pass on to the guidance? This is the chain of custody guidance, as it is. As I've said, the standard is more general. The guidance is more. It goes into more detailed application of how the standard should be applied. So the guidance, it is as important as the standard. One part that is worth mentioning is the RJC has agreed upon that the origin for recycled gold, silver, or PGM is the point at which it is returned to the refinery or other downstream intermediate processor or recycler. So practically, they've claimed that the origin of the recycled gold is the refinery, which is very, very, very far away from the truth. The origin comes from the first individual seller, individual seller selling their broken or used piece of jewelry to the pawn shops. This is the riskiest part of their supply chain, and it's not identified as the origin. One very interesting thing right now is that, could you please share the image? Or could you please share with us the image of the supply chain? Take some moments. There. This is from the same guidance, and if you could see in the red in the circle just above collection, you could see that the point of original recycled material in this image from the guidance is the pawn shop and cash for gold. So it is contradictory that they claim that the refinery is the point of origin, and then you see in the guidance this image. This image is probably not going to be added again in the standard, but this image is very telling. Like this image describes appropriately the whole reprocessed or recycled supply chain. So I insist, the point of origin for recyclable material is the pawn shops, cash for gold, and collectors. And they should be properly identified and certified in the chain of custody standard. Could we please go back to the guidance? Another point, we'll go over the same risks that are well published in the guidances. Could you put the word stolen, please? Yes. Here, the guidance does a great job. Practically, they've summarized the whole risks associated from sourcing recycled gold. Supply chains for recyclable high-value gold are vulnerable to money and gold laundering. The sources, the Financial Action Task Force and the OECD, included but not limited to criminal organizations laundering the profits from illicit activities through the purchase and sale of gold, gold mined in a conflict-affected or high-risk area and transformed into jewelry to hide its true origin, and stolen jewelry and ornaments sold for cash to gold pawn brokers. So pretty much the risks are identified. I'm not claiming that 100% of the material that is being sold as recycled comes from these sources. But what I'm seeing here is that these risks are not properly disclosed. And the probability for these risks to become true are very high in this supply chain, and there's not being enough disclosure. Translation gets lost completely from refinery to downstream company, whether it be a technological company or whether it be a jewelry company. I think there's no disclosure whatsoever of this risk. Translations are being 100% recycled source. Some even go as far as to claim scope 3 carbon neutrality for this change, for the supply chain, completely disregarding the risk associated from these sources. So what we're calling here is more transparency and more communication with regards to the risk associated from sourcing recycled gold, probably now reprocessed gold. So I'll go, for example, here, gold mined from a conflict area or high risk area are transformed into jewelry to hide its true origin. I'll give you an example. Gold mined in Africa. This gold mine in Africa could be smuggled to a nearby country. This mine gold could be refined. Refining gold could be done in a beaker in a hole in the ground in Africa, in any place. It is not a refining is not a complex procedure. Just a couple of chemicals that are added, and you could get high grade refined gold of 99.5 purity, erasing any trace of any other trace minerals associated to this. The costs are, they go near to 0.003 cents per gram, and if the refining is done to be artisanally in a beaker with simple chemicals, the costs are very, very low. After this, they could add copper or silver to make an alloy, and they could do rudimentary pieces of casting. Casting, once again, in the most extreme case, casting won't be more than 0.5% of the value of the gold. So I'm telling you, from refining and casting a rudimentary piece in 18 karat gold, or even 22, how it's named elephant gold, it will never go above 0.7 or 1% of its gold value. So if people are transforming this illegally sourced gold from Africa into jewelry pieces, 22K, 18K, and selling them as used jewelry, well, its origin was completely changed. Mercury was eliminated in the process of refining, so there's no traces of mercury, there's no traces of other minerals. So this is where it's extremely complicated, and this is where I find something to be addressed. Most of this legally sourced material could come from illegal mining operations, small illegal mining extraction operations, and being transformed into recycled gold in less than 2 or 3 days. So there's a huge risk that this is happening, and it should be addressed as soon as possible. Or at least the easiest way is to communicate the risk appropriately to every actor in the supply chain, especially to downstream companies. Because what we're seeing is downstream companies are marketing, they're marketing as recycled gold. They're erasing footprints from this example that I gave you in less than 10 days. So it is definitely something that should be addressed in the shortest time possible. Once again, in the guidance, they talk about a reasonable determination of the origin according to the size of the company. So please, vague words are no longer accepted. I'll take an example of today, what's happening right now. Recently, the COP28 meeting that was held over in the UAE about fossil fuels. Now people are understanding the importance of words in agreements. It is very important, the correct application of the specific words. I'll give you an example in the fossil fuels. Countries were aiming for the phase out of fossil fuels. The word out is very clear. It means phase out. No more use of fossil fuels. The fossil fuels industry were trying to incorporate the word phase down, which did not imply eliminated entirely the use of fossil fuels. So instead of using out or down, it makes a huge difference. You phase down, you could phase down in 500 years. If there's not a specific time frame, if there's not a specific amount, and it could be perpetually The use of fossil fuels could be used with no controls and with no time frame. So this is why it's important. The wording is important. Finally, the agreement was not even phased down. It was transitioning from fossil fuels. It is completely ambiguous. There's no time frame. There's no amounts. There's nothing specific. It's just simply the wording. And they've used thousands and thousands and thousands of lobbyists in order to change a simple word. So that's what we're seeing here. It is very hard for companies in the recycled gold sector just to claim the risk associated from sourcing their gold from recycled gold. I don't see a single company, a single refinery that is disclosing that their reprocessed or recycled gold comes from pawn shops. They work so hard in order to avoid this word, they don't even mention the word. So I believe it's very responsible to start disclosing their sources in a very specific way and to start talking about pawn shops. So this or cash for gold shops. This is very important, and what we're asking is more transparency and disclosure about the sourcing of the materials. I would like to clarify once again, know your customer is not traceability. Know your customer, know your counterparty. It's just a reasonable identification of the party that you're doing business with. But traceability implies traceability from the origin. So it will be much more nice to see how the origin is determined by the entity or institution or global institution, and to see transparency and to see honesty. It is really easy. Just need to disclose, hey, we source from pawn shops. These are the risks associated from sourcing from pawn shops or cash for gold. And a percentage of this comes from these and these types of pawn shops. It is as easy as that. So what we're seeing is that standards are being used, labels are being used. These are all tactics that are not going to pass through. They will not hold their water with critical thought and with the transparency that the new generations are seeking. Now, I will go into our recommendations. Our team just redacted the recommendations for the RJC drafts. Number 1 is please maintain the requirements of the OECD. Please. The OECD is a leading organization. They do have good intents in order to bring appropriate due diligences and transparency and traceability into an industry that is screaming for it. Point number 2 is no more weird names, no more grandfathered, no more legacied. Just refer to them as gold without origin. Why is it gold without origin? Because nobody knows where it comes from. It is not that hard to label it as it is. And let downstream companies or the public in general make a decision how comfortable they are with the explanations provided. Then we're going to go to the recycled or reprocessed gold. Very important. Please distinguish between eligible recycled materials and eligible reprocessed materials in different subsections. 2 different sources. One, like to provide clarity, reprocessed materials refer to high-value gold and silver and PGM materials, while recycled materials pertain to waste containing less than 2% of precious metal content. Please don't add precious metal containing objects into the recycled materials, because most of the people are going to go and use the precious metal containing materials and label the precious metal containing materials into recycled materials, and they will not use the reprocessed materials. So these are like I don't know, they could be used as legalities or not getting into specifics, but if the definitions or the wording are not going to be specific, it is not going to work. So a lot of the companies are going to use this loophole and claim their material as recycled, and no advancement is going to be made. Once again, define that the source of the processed gold is the individual seller. The entire supply chain from the pawn shops, including intermediaries and collectors, must be identified, audited, and certified. This is perhaps the most important in order to be coherent with the strong wording of chain of custody. Here, I talk about the risks of fraudulent statements to conceal criminal gold as reprocessed gold is very high. Therefore, each transaction must be supported by evidence in the form of photographic and film records, capturing the purchase and the jewelry when it's received by the pawn shop from the individual seller. Additionally, there should be a photographic records documenting the process before and after the transformation of jewelry into ingots. These constitute two crucial points concerning reprocessed gold. This evidence must exist for all reprocessed gold, not a portion of it. So it's very important. Perhaps the highest risk is once this recycled gold or used jewelry is smelted. There's a very high risk of contamination, and the people could use this loophole in order to introduce recently mined gold as recycled gold, selling it just as a bar or refined bar. That's even worse. So part of being responsible is ensuring traceability for the whole supply chain, not just ensuring KYC that's mandatory practically for every company in the world today, but it's going to taking it a little bit further and guaranteeing and having evidence of the transactions. Once again, avoid using the word reasonable in relation to verifying the original and assessing the risk associated with reprocessed gold. And it has a very ambiguous interpretation, and replace it with the use of clear words and clear definitions. And one final observation is that chain of custody, the name should be eliminated. If the standard does not guarantee traceability, does not guarantee a custody of the entire supply chain, it should not be labeled like that. It is completely misleading, and we have a recommendation that if the institution is not going to follow through with specific rules for traceability, they should go with a reasonable verification standard, because that is what it is right now. It's what they understand as reasonable. Traceability is not guaranteed, and definitely it should be communicated. Another recommendations that we're trying to do, the RJC does not collect data on how much gold their entire participants are using. Nonetheless, they don't even have the entirety of how many tons they're consuming, what type of gold in percentage-wise, if it's gold from mines, if it's recycled gold, what type of recycled gold, what type of reprocessed gold. They do not have this information. Now, they're not even, since they don't recollect it, they won't be able to publish it, and it will be very important for them to gather this information for the sake of transparency and publish it in a similar way the London Bullion Market is doing so in this matter. What puzzles me is how is this institution taking decisions if they don't have the appropriate data to analyze it and make the corresponding. If I were to guess, the participants of the chain of custody standards, more than 90% are using recycled gold or reprocessed gold, as it's named today. but information is not, it doesn't exist. So here we're having a standards company that does not have the appropriate information to take the appropriate decisions, and they're not being transparent with regards of how much gold their companies are using. What they're being very effective is communicating that they have a transparency standard, they have a traceability standard, and they are the most respected source and the most respected standard in the market. So this is far from the truth, and a lot of things needs to be corrected. And really hoping forward for the RJC to publish a report, a sourcing report on the refineries and on the companies, about the companies, about how much gold their participants are using and which type of gold their participants are using. This is for the sake of transparency, and this is for bringing clarity to market participants and bringing clarity to the whole industry. So we've gone through a lot of opinions, a lot of topics. I hope you could get a very good understanding of how the RJC is working. Please let me know your opinions. Please, if you wanted to do it through our LinkedIn, my LinkedIn is Andres Castellanos. You'll find me over there. My email is andres.castellanos@feralloy.eco. If you have any inquiries, please, if you want us to speak, or if you have any conference event that you wish that we could talk about this, or if you want further details from where we source our data, we are more than glad to participate, and we're more than glad to give our opinions about the RJC and about. If one thing is clear, is that recycled gold for the moment is untraceable. Recycled gold, or now being labeled reprocessed gold, is very hard to trace back, at least to the pawn shops. It's impossible to trace back to the mine. But what could be done is at least give the pawn shops or cash for gold the spotlight that should be received. With this spotlight, the risk should be correctly addressed, and what's more important is to be correctly for a correct disclosure of the risks and the sources from this type of material. So thank you once again for your time, and we'll be in contact through more virtual blogs of things that we have seen in this market. Probably the next ones are going to be about carbon offsetting in the recycled gold refineries, and carbon neutral gold, scope 3, which entails the whole entire supply chain carbon neutrality, and how loose definitions or loose standards are being used in order to make outrageous claims. So thank you once again for your time, and have a great vacation. Please, if you agree with our observations, you can find our observations it will be posted in my LinkedIn, and you can complete the form with the RJC. Your opinion does matter. It matters, in fact, a lot. And yeah, it will be nice to have our opinion voiced and sent over to the RJC. Have a very nice day or afternoon, and we'll be talking. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.